Welcome to episode 177 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who survived the urban jungle known as Manhattan and New York City, John Scott Sloat.
Doc, what's happening?
This feels weird to be back in the studio.
It's been 22 days since we've been on the microphone.
Yeah.
Since our marathon sesh.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And sadly, we may have to
do
that
another
again soon.
Yep.
We'll see. So, yes. But, well, it's good to be back in the studio.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots happened.
Yep. Graduation happened.
Yeah. Graduation.
Anything interesting happen at your ceremony that you were at?
No.
My new role. Do you want to know what my role at graduation is?
Sure.
My new role at graduation is we outline a number of VIPs who are at graduation, and my role is to escort them to their seats and make sure they're doing okay.
Okay.
But once the ceremony starts, I'm done, and I can leave.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. My role is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I have to read the names.
Yes. When did you take on that responsibility?
I mean, when was I voluntold that I was doing that? That was last year.
Yeah. Okay, so last year was the first year.
Yeah.
And any really tricky names this year?
As far as I know, I did okay. Though the near disaster was I forgot to bring reading glasses. And I'm right on the cusp of I can do this without, but it's riskier.
So how far out were you having the whole paper?
I managed to borrow some from somebody. Somebody came through in the clutch.
Are reading glasses interchangeable?
Yeah, they're basically just magnifiers.
Is that what – there's no prescription involved?
No.
Really?
Yeah, that's why you can go to like Walgreens and there's a whole rack of them. You just buy it by how much magnification you want.
Really?
Yes, you're not aware of this?
No, I had no clue. I thought reading glasses were by prescription.
No. I mean, I can go to Walgreens or CVS or anywhere basically, and they have a whole rack of reading glasses based on magnification level. So like
however much you need.
Yeah. So like
interesting.
I mean, I use very light ones, like either 1.25 or 1.5 magnification.
Interesting.
So I did manage to borrow some. So crisis averted there. But and then, I did also get to turn the tassel of my son Jake when he graduated.
Yeah.
So
Jake in Indiana.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure they can't figure out who he is.
Yeah.
But that was fun. Let's do our standard here. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can reach out to us on Twitter at VNSPod. Email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And we'd love a 5-star rating and a review. We did have someone reach out to us and suggest that during our absence would have been a grand time for us to have the Mrs. Various and Sundry podcast. But correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is our wives are on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum on this. My wife is desperate to get on the show. Your wife has no interest in being on the show.
If Andrea's willing. I think she would want a script. She'd want to know questions that she was going to be asked, and she would not want to deviate from those questions.
I see.
And her answers to those questions.
I see.
The other thing I think about is both of our wives are Luddite-ish. And so I think the like recording board would really throw them for a loop. Like, how does this function? How do I turn it on? Why does it need an SD card? It's a big enough piece of equipment. Why did it just record internally? Things like that I think would throw them for a loop without you and I here to do the technology for them.
Yeah, I think someone would need to help them with the technology. I think that's right. So,
yeah, those are my insights into that.
Fair enough.
Although my wife did listen to the Things Our Families Make Fun of Us For episode.
And what was the feedback? What kind of – I know you've gotten some feedback from this episode, as have I. What
people are very concerned about my bird habits.
Yes.
And in part I go like, don't look too closely into the sun. The rabbit hole goes pretty deep to mix metaphors there. But
okay.
Yeah, that's probably the most feedback I've gotten.
All right.
What feedback have you gotten?
My younger son would like to clarify that he does not give me trash for being a mediocre high school athlete.
Oh, he gets lumped in with
my older son. Yes, yes.
John in Indiana.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there was nothing on there that they're like, oh, that's crazy. That never happens. Like, especially the getting teased for being shorter than them. But yeah, I think that was a good episode.
That was fun.
Yeah.
From what I remember 22 days ago recording
it. No kidding. All right. What's also funny is, 3 weeks ago when we recorded, it was like 48 degrees and overcast. And now today's a beautiful summer day.
Yeah, 75, 80 degrees.
Yeah.
It's great.
Loving it. And students are gone. Campus is empty.
Yep.
Very quiet.
The summer chill.
Yeah.
Chillness of campus has begun.
Yeah. I was so running around crazy at the end of the semester, between finishing the semester academically, grading papers, preparing for graduation, preparing for the installation service of Zach in Ohio, and preparing to leave the country for 2 weeks, that when I got home from the trip, it finally hit me like, oh, it's the summer now. Like I'm in summer mode. I'm not in this like pressure cooker of there's an immediate deadline for something tomorrow or something like that. So anyway, you ready to talk some sports?
Sure.
So we have been gone for a few weeks, meaning that we haven't talked sports. And so probably the biggest story in the NBA obviously is you've got the conference finals, both at 3-0. Both of them 3 games to nothing. So Nuggets up on the Lakers 3-0, and the Heat up on the Celtics 3-0. That's surprising.
That makes me feel a little bit better about the Knicks losing to them. But
yeah, it's so weird. Though I do remember, and I want to give you credit for this, I remember at the beginning of the playoffs when we talked about the play-in tournament, one of the things you said is, I think to really validate its legitimacy, you're going to need to have somebody who plays in it make a deep run. And here you go.
Yeah.
The Heat.
The Heat have made a really – and they're playing really good basketball right now.
Unless something unprecedented happens, the Heat are going to be playing in the NBA Finals.
Yep.
It's Heat Nuggets.
Yep.
Because in the NBA at least, there's never been a team come back from a 3-0 playoff deficit.
Well, and at the beginning of the playoffs, I believe I called Lakers-Celtics finals, which I'm now going to be wrong about, most likely.
Yeah. But, you got 2 teams in the conference finals. That's not bad.
Yeah, yeah. And there's part of me that's like, good for you, Nuggets. Jokic feels like he gets put on the back burner of the NBA.
Yeah, I would like to see the Nuggets win. In terms of preference out of those 4 teams who I want to win an NBA title, I'd probably go Nuggets, Lakers, Celtics, Heat. I cannot stand the Heat.
Yeah. Any team that doesn't use an S at the end of their name just really drives me nuts.
Yeah. Though I will acknowledge Eric Spoelstra is a phenomenal coach. I think I way undersold him when he had Bosch and Wade and LeBron. You're like, gosh, just roll the basketball out there and they could probably win a title.
Yeah.
But since LeBron left and that team kind of dismantled, he has consistently had them in the playoffs and make runs.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were in the finals a couple years ago.
Yeah. So, I think I underestimated how good of a coach he is. Let's see. Did you watch any of the PGA Championship over the weekend?
I know Brooks Koepka won.
On the program, we refer to him as Bruce Koepka.
Bruce Koepka, excuse me. Koepka. I know he won.
Yeah.
But I did not watch it.
See, I only watched the very. I probably watched the last 10 or 11 holes on Sunday.
Okay.
And did you follow it or read anything about this Michael Brooks,
Nope.
the Tour Pro?
Nope.
So it was the PGA Championship, and so there's a way for these sort of club pros. So, you go to a golf club and they have a Tour Pro on
Sure.
staff there.
And they can all play into this tournament.
And there's a play-in mechanism for them to get there. So this guy made it to the tournament, and he finished 15th, which is one of the highest finishes ever.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean this guy is not a full-time professional PGA Tour.
He's not
golfer.
on tour.
He's not on tour. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was just a remarkable story. And he part of what sort of added to the legend is he had a hole in one on, I think it was 15 or 16. And it was he dunked it. It didn't land on the green and roll in. He flew it in.
Nice.
And because he couldn't fully see it, the crowd just erupts and goes crazy. And he's thinking, oh, I just hit it close. And so Rory McIlroy, who's playing in his group, comes up, hugs him, and he's still what's happening here? And he's walking 20 yards down the fairway, and he turns around and goes, did it go in? Yeah, it went in.
Oh, that's too funny.
So, yeah, just a fun story. And by finishing 15th, he gets an exemption to play again next year in the PGA Championship. So just a cool kind of –
I'm sure the prize winnings for 15th is pretty good as well.
Yeah, I would think so.
More than his salary
probably
at the local club.
Yeah. So a fun little story there. What's going on with your Mets?
So have you
I have no clue.
Okay.
Literally no clue.
So they were trash for most of the time you were out of the country.
Okay.
So while you were gone, they lost 3 or 4 series in a row to bad teams. Cincinnati Reds, sorry, Steve. There's a handful of teams they lost series to.
Yeah.
Well, they limped into a series against the Tampa Bay Rays, who do you know what's going on with them?
I don't.
As that series started, they'd only lost 10 games this year.
Okay.
So they were the best team in baseball. And somehow the Mets took 2 of 3 from them.
All right.
Pete Alonso played with the flu. Some people are calling it the flu game. And they came back. They won 2 of 3. And now they just swept the Guardians. And sorry, Nate, in Ohio.
Yeah, that's tough.
And, things are looking up at the moment. They're getting healthy. They're starting to hit again. So it's a long season.
Okay.
That's really the update. They were playing like trash. They weren't even fun to watch.
Baseball is such a long season.
Yep.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on.
Okay.
We should remind people that we are doing the summer read. We are reading Brian Rosner's book, How to Find Yourself. Why Looking Inward is Not the Answer. And we will discuss on the next episode the first 5 chapters, which is part 1.
Yeah, so we had a discussion pre-pod about whether we were going to do the parts or individual chapters equally, and I think parts just made more sense.
It did. So that's part 1, 5 chapters. What did we say it was? 70 pages? Yeah, that's doable. So that's the game plan there. All right, John, it's time for us to do a recap of our travels.
Okay.
We were both out of town. I was out of the country. You basically were by being in New York City. So, so reminding our listeners, you were in New York City, I was in London and in Brussels.
Okay.
And so this is us just kind of recapping, hitting highlights.
And we haven't really done this yet with one another
No.
much, other than
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. So yeah. Do you want to go back and forth?
Sure.
I logged in this morning to write mine, and I noticed you had yours down, so I just picked the same number.
It's fine. Again, this is a suggested – I mean, it's very free-flowing. Obviously, you're not required to stick to the script.
Yeah. In fact, I just added another one in my head that I'll try to work in elsewhere. But do you want me to go first?
Sure, why not?
Okay. So the first full day we had there, we were in New York City. We stayed on the Upper West Side at the YMCA, actually.
Okay.
They had hotel rooms that were real cheap, and the mattresses were real thin. But we went out to Brooklyn. We went out to a neighborhood called Crown Heights. Do you know about Crown Heights?
I don't.
It is one of the largest Hasidic Jewish neighborhoods in the country.
Okay.
And we actually paid for a 3-hour tour with a Hasidic rabbi.
Interesting.
And let me tell you, that was fascinating. First of all, this guy was probably 27.
Oh, a young guy.
He was young. He wasn't an old man, which is kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But he invited us into his mother's house, and they had this big dining room table, and she made us all these like Jewish cookies and lemon loaf and all these things. It was fantastic.
Okay.
Talked about the Jewish religion, talked about the commandments, talked about the Talmud, talked about – we went into – his mother gave us a tour of her kosher kitchen. Fascinating. And then we just started walking around the neighborhood, and he's like showing us things. We went into like this we were upstairs at the synagogue where the men from like 14 to like 21 were studying the Talmud and arguing about it for 8 hours a day. And all the men of that age were in there. We went to like a scroll repair shop, which is probably not what they would say, but somebody who was like repairing the scrolls to make sure that the law wasn't corrupted or lost or anything. So
interesting.
It was wild. It was absolutely wild.
And did he know you were from a Christian organization, from a Christian university?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We talked about that a little bit. But he was really friendly. I mean, wore the hat and had the suit on and everything.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
It was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So our first full day in London was a fun day because we connected with Ben, our incoming.
Not the clock.
Not the clock. Though we did take pictures with Ben in front of Big Ben.
And I hear the scaffolding's down.
Yeah,
around
you
Big
can
Ben.
actually see it.
That's great.
Yeah. So Ben, soon to be in Winona Lake. Ben currently in England, but he is so he came down to London for the day and just kind of acted as our kind of informal guide.
That's great.
Around the city. That was a lot of fun. So we did the
Students respond well to Ben?
Oh, they love Ben.
Good.
So we did the kind of the loop where we kind of started at Parliament in Big Ben and then went over to Westminster Abbey. Actually went inside Westminster Abbey, and I did the tour.
Oh, you paid for a full tour?
Well, we had the London Pass, which is one of
you
these.
got the London Pass.
I did.
Interesting.
And it was totally worth it.
Really?
Yes. Interesting. Totally worth it. So we got to go inside. And part of what was cool about that was in Westminster Abbey. So we were there on the 10th. So that's like 4 days after the coronation of King Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Which happened in Westminster Abbey.
Yep.
And so they still had things set up for that. So they still had the special platform that he was on and just like right there's the chair where he sat and where he was coronated. Like just very cool to be there that soon after it. But just a fun day walking around with Ben. hitting up Borough Market.
Borough Market.
And massive food court area and that kind of stuff. So a lot of fun that day. A lot of fun today. So that's where I'll start.
Okay. My next one is we went to this is going to sound like it's going to be lame and made fun of on a sitcom someday, but we went to a Ukrainian spoken word event. So it took place in an art gallery, and there were all these chairs set up. And so we sat down in these chairs, and then these 5 Ukrainians walked out and all sat in chairs, and they sort of each told a little bit about their story and what it's like to be Ukrainian. And it was all – they interspersed one another. They asked one another questions, all planned, all scripted, but all their true stories. And there was one guy who grew up in Detroit, Michigan, who was Ukrainian, who had kept this traditional Ukrainian instrument. He and his family were some of the last players of this instrument and kind of kept this alive. And when the Soviets left Ukraine and Ukraine declared its independence, the Ukrainian government invited him back, and he traveled the country teaching people to play this instrument again. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was another guy who grew up during the Cold War on Long Island and talked about like constantly being confused with Russians and how much he was just like sort of socially kept at arm's length from friends.
Sure.
And then there was one woman. She had quite the story where she was like a Ukrainian singer and was brought to Moscow and was like singing for the Russian leaders, and how they were just – she talked about how they were all just strung out on drugs and all sorts of stuff. And then there was one young woman who talked about being a news reporter when the bomb started falling in Ukraine just a year and a half ago, and that was fascinating. That was absolutely fascinating. So that was that and the Hasidic Jewish tour were probably the 2 most popular events we had on our schedule.
Okay. Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the next one I'm going to go with is our day in Oxford. So we took the train. This is a whole thing. Apparently in England, they decide we're just going to do a strike. The rail workers decide we're going to do a strike. And they like randomly kind of pick days. Well, we didn't know that our day that we were going to Oxford is one of those days where they are on strike.
Goodness gracious.
So the train that's supposed to take us from London to Oxford is not operating. So we had to ended up being able to take a train to another stop and then catch a replacement bus that took us to Oxford. So it worked. We got there. But it was a big thing.
Yeah.
But our tour guide there, he was fantastic. Took us around the campus at Oxford as well as the city, and knew his stuff. And so we met up with him, and so I'm walking with him, and he's asking about our group, and I'm telling him where we're from, and he's like, "Oh wait, you guys are Christians?" Yeah, it's a Christian university, and we're all Christians. And he's like, "Oh, so I can talk about God." Please do. Yeah,
we're very pro God. Yes.
We would like that. Yes, and so he was just fascinating. He talked about the spiritual climate there at Oxford, and as well as just the history of the focus was on C.S. Lewis and Tolkien.
Nice. As
well as he showed us spots where they filmed scenes from the Harry Potter films.
Oh, of course.
And
got to.
Yeah. So that was just fascinating. But he was an interesting guy because he had graduated from Oxford many years ago, mid-90s. So he's about my age, basically.
Okay.
But now is a photographer, like a self-employed photographer, lives like 15, 20 miles outside of Oxford in the countryside. But he had worked in publishing. He was in New York on 9/11, working in New York.
Whoa!
And so he had fascinating insights about American culture and that kind of thing. But Yeah, he was terrific. He showed us spots related to – there's a spot as you're walking around Oxford where there's the lamppost that inspired Lewis
for Narnia.
Yeah, for Narnia.
Yep.
That was fascinating, showing us Tolkien lived over there, Lewis lived over there. Here's the pub where they would hang out. But he was a charismatic Catholic.
Yeah, those are that's becoming more and more popular.
And a big fan of Bethel and Hillsong. So I'm like,
That's quite the mixture.
Yeah, very interesting. But just a fascinating guy. I have already recommended him to somebody else going to Oxford for a tour. Like he's really good.
Fun.
Really good. So, yep, day in Oxford.
Oh my goodness. We connected while we were in New York. So the focus of the trip was supposed to be on vocation. And so we connected with the VACA Center or the VOCA Center, depending on where you put the pronunciation. But their president, CEO, executive director, however you want to, the honcho, sat down with our group for 2 hours and did a workshop at a WeWork conference room, which I had never been to before. And so, you familiar with WeWork?
No.
So they basically provide workspace around cities.
Okay. That you can then go in and rent for like a day, a week,
exactly,
an hour or 2 hour, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, I don't know the full story, but something collapsed with WeWork at some point in the last 5 or 7 years, and it was bad news. There's some sense of the company being back, but we met there, and he was just great. Our students walked away going like, I had never heard some of that stuff before. And I was like, I'm willing to bet some of it you have. But
you just weren't paying attention. Yeah. Yeah.
But
that's good.
But he was really, really good. Going to try to have him on campus this year if I can get him.
Yeah.
Or if the powers that be let us get him.
There you go. Let's see where to go to next. Yeah, I'll mention this one. This is a shorter one, but this is still in London. But on the free day, I joined up with a few students, and we did a tour of London Stadium, which is where the Olympics were.
Yeah, 2012.
Yep, and is now currently the home of the West Ham football club.
Yep.
And that was just a fascinating tour. Like I think it's well documented on the program. I'm not the biggest soccer fan, but just fascinating to go in and see the facility, and ended up walking around with this guy and his son. This guy had season tickets, and so within like 5 minutes of talking with this guy, he's talking with my son, who is a big West Ham fan, and he's like, oh, well, the next time you're around, like, I'll get you tickets. I have season tickets. And you're like, okay, like, sometimes somebody might say that. He's like,
sure.
Yeah, get my contact information afterwards. And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, no, really, like, he mentions it again. So my son connected with this guy, just really, really neat guy. But this is funny. So my son and his lovely girlfriend Autumn were doing this tour with us, and at the end we're saying goodbye to him, and so I reach across, like we were in the gift shop. I reach across, like there's a table of like merchandise between us. So I reach across, shake his hand. Well, Autumn is in the same row as him, and so he goes to say goodbye to her, and she kind of tentatively starts to put her hand out, and it's like, he's not going for the handshake. Goes for the kiss on the cheek.
Really? Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So that was just like, whoa, what just happened there? Like, okay.
Oh, goodness.
Chalk that up to cultural differences, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
oh, my goodness.
Anyway, that was fun.
So this next one was actually based on a listener recommendation.
Okay.
Steve in Cincinnati hooked me up with one of his business associates who lives in New York, who I believe was born in Hong Kong and has lived his whole life in New York, gave us a tour of Chinatown.
Yes, I remember you talking about doing this. Yeah,
And he was a fascinating guy. He kept coming over to me. He knew we were a religious group, and he kept coming to me going like, hey, is it okay if I tell him about this?
Yeah.
And every time I just went, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
But it was things like, and this is one of the more tame ones, that corner right there is where the movie Gangs of New York was based off of. One of the most dangerous corners in America at the time. That building right there was one of the largest – I'm trying to think of ways to phrase this with children in the car.
Places where people of ill repute might spend time?
Houses of pleasure.
I don't know if that's the safest, but brothel?
Yeah.
I might have gone with brothel.
Maybe. Was the largest in America. He was a little concerned. He was planning to show us the largest Buddha in America. Okay. It's in New York, which I did not know. But he goes, hey, my wife thought you guys might be offended if I showed you a Buddha. Was that going to be a problem? I was like, no, please do. And let me tell you, that Buddha was huge. I mean, just massive.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Tour of Chinatown.
Yeah. So I've mentioned several from London. I want to give some love to Brussels as well. So I had been to London before with you on the previous mystery trip, but I'd never been to Brussels. And so I loved, first of all, being able to do the train from London to Brussels, going under the English Channel, the Chuttle.
Nice.
That was fun. And then through the French countryside and on into Belgium and Brussels.
I hear things are expensive in Brussels. Is that?
They are. Yeah.
More so than London?
Probably a little bit. I think that's probably fair. But while we were in Brussels, we did a day trip to Bruges, which is northwest a little bit of Brussels, about an hour by train. And it's a beautiful, old, kind of like classical-looking European city. It's a smaller city, but it has very much the old European look about it. And you could take this – we took this canal tour. So it's nowhere near on the scale of like a Venice.
Sure.
But it has extensive canals where you can take a boat tour and they point out different buildings and that kind of stuff. And it was fascinating. We were there the day before Ascension Day, which we as American Christians don't tend to celebrate.
Sure.
But like the Ascension Day is apparently like the biggest day in the city of Bruges all year. So they were setting up for this massive festival that they
Interesting.
But it's just a beautiful, quaint, old-looking European city, buildings that date from, the 1200s, the 1300s. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. If you make it to Brussels, it's worth the day trip to get up to Bruges.
How many more you want to do?
Maybe one more each. You good with that?
Yeah. I am going to choose bagels.
Okay.
Just about every morning, I had some form of a delicious New York City bagel. Different flavors, varieties, with a schmear.
Of course.
And let me tell you, they're just so good.
Yeah.
There's something about them.
Okay.
They're just amazing.
Okay.
New York City bagels, H&H or Broad and Nash, or there's very, 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 very good bagels.
Gotcha.
In New York.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I'm also going to go on a food angle here, but I'm going to save one particular food experience for the one thing I liked. But the food in Brussels was very good. They had a lot of these like smaller kind of mom and pop-ish kind of storefronts around the Grand Place. The Grand Place is this massive like center market kind of courtyard area that's famous there in Brussels. And I had an amazing gyro from a Greek place.
Lamb?
I think it was pork.
Interesting.
It's still delightful. You know you're in good shape when you go into one of these places and they've got the meat like on a spit and they're going to shave it off. Like then you know you're probably in the right place.
Well, I think that's generally how gyro you get the meat from
ideally,
for a gyro.
yes, ideally,
or a euro, however you pronounce it.
Yeah. So, so you mentioned your accommodations, hotel at the YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
We had pretty good accommodations. Our Airbnb in London was a little small for 14 people.
Mm-hmm.
But our place in Brussels was beautiful, like out of a storybook kind of beautiful.
Oh, fun.
Kind of. I'll have to show you pictures.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just remarkable. And had a great host, Philippe. So we got there and he took us I think he spent an hour with me, taking me around the house, telling me the history of the house, giving me instructions. Then he walked the 6 minutes to the bus stop to show me exactly where it was, to the point where some people in our group texted me, "Are you still alive?" Like they wondered if Philippe had taken me off and killed me quietly somewhere in the neighborhood. But yes, and I think I mentioned off show here. Had some transportation issues there in Belgium with the public transit system. Not a fan.
Yeah,
not a fan. Not nearly the same level as that in London.
Even with the strike in London. Yes. Yep. Yeah. How did you mainly get around? Subway.
Okay.
New York City subway is pretty easy to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah, relatively easy to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, Google Maps for the win in terms of navigating
Absolutely.
international cities. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's just remarkable.
It's very good in New York, down to the minute. It's good.
Yeah, I think it would be way more challenging to do something like this without Google Maps. Like it could be done.
Oh yeah,
but it'd be more complicated.
Absolutely.
So, all right, I think we should probably move on, John. Don't you think?
Yep.
Time now for This Day in Sports History.
This Day in Sports History, 1948. Future baseball Hall of Fame center fielder Joe DiMaggio hits 3 consecutive home runs as the Yankees edge the Indians 6-5 at Cleveland Stadium.
Yeah.
Joe DiMaggio. 3 home runs, only win by a run.
Joltin' Joe.
2013, Patrick Waugh.
I figured you'd get that one.
Yeah. Oh, I know Patrick Waugh, spelled Roy, but Patrick Waugh is named head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, his former team where he won 2 Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
He was a good goaltender.
He was.
Although he would break down occasionally and give up 5 or 6 goals. Anyway, 2018, NFL owners approve NFL national anthem policy whereby players are required to stand if they choose to be on the field for pregame presentations.
All right.
2021 PGA Championship in men's golf at the Ocean Course at Kiowa Island.
Sure.
Did I pronounce that right?
Maybe.
That's in South Carolina.
Is it? I don't know.
Yes. I'm 90% sure. Phil Mickelson becomes the oldest major winner in history. Wins his 6th major by 2 strokes over Bruce Koepka and Louis Oosthuizen.
Louis Oosthuizen.
Do you remember? I remember a time when Phil Mickelson, it was like, oh, they can't win a major.
Yeah.
Can't do it. And now, 6.
Good old lefty.
Yeah.
Good old lefty. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. The pickings were a little bit slim as I did the prep for this. Do you have a preference as you look at that?
Maybe Joe DiMaggio.
I'm good with that. I like Joltin' Joe.
As much as I despise the Yankees,
he's a cultural icon, man.
He is.
Okay. You good with that?
Yeah, I think so.
One thing you liked.
Okay, so I mentioned that we had time in New York City with the VOCA or VOCA Center, depending on how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused me to engage their podcast network. And so they have a couple of podcasts. One that I'd like to highlight today, Resilient Faith at Work. The Resilient Faith at Work podcast. Really, really good. They just kind of regularly say, we're trying to bring wisdom to work and how you think about work, how you do your work. So they're tackling questions like, all right, what do you do when you don't have much motivation for your work? What do you do when you have a terrible manager at work? What do you do when you have terrible people that work for you at work? Like what do you do?
Okay.
And so helpful things and bringing godly wisdom along with that.
All right. So for me, I'm going to go with waffles. I'm going to be honest. I was a little skeptical that the waffles would live up to the hype. I was wrong. They were amazing. So 2 particular places. So in Brussels, we went to this place. I think it's a little bit of a chain, but it's called Maison Dandoy, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Okay.
And I had a waffle there that was covered in like a caramel sauce.
Oh, okay.
Great start, right?
Yeah.
Whipped topping.
Okay.
And caramel ice cream.
Oh, my goodness.
It was amazing.
So do they do waffles as breakfast food or is it strictly dessert over there?
It was kind of a make your own, but this was a special one that they had. They had a specific name that I can't remember, but it was delicious.
Now, what set it apart? Was it the ice cream? Was the waffle crispy?
The waffle was really good. The caramel sauce was a salted caramel as well. So,
I like salted caramel. Yeah,
just
hard to beat.
And the whipped cream was clearly like homemade in the sense of freshly made, not out of a can or something. Like delightful. And then when we were in Bruges, we went to a place called Lizzie's Waffles. Now, this was recommended to me by my nephew who'd been to Belgium in the spring. And it was probably even better. The waffle was ginormous. And and we got waited on by Lizzie herself.
Really?
And she was such a character. So someone is asking – so we're looking at the menu, and basically you pick a waffle and then you like add on toppings, you know. And so one of the guys on the trip says to her, so I see here on the menu that syrup is an option. Should I get that? And she gets this like offended look on her face. It's like, no. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you ruin a perfectly good waffle by putting syrup on it?
Was chicken an option?
It was not. I did not find chicken in waffles. That would have been epic. I think that's more of a southern U.S. thing than a Belgium thing.
I'd assume so.
But it was the lightest, flakiest waffle I have ever tasted, even though it was enormous. After I finished it, I didn't have that heavy feeling in your stomach. You know, if you eat waffles sometimes, you're like, if you eat too many, you get the big heavy feeling in your stomach where it just kind of sits.
Yeah.
These were so light and flaky. They were amazing. Lizzie's Waffles in Bruges. Home run place.
Fun.
Yes.
I'll have to remember that if I'm ever in Bruges.
Yeah. If you get to Belgium, you should go to Bruges. It's worth it. All right, John, we have talked NBA playoffs, PGA Championship. We have talked summer read. Make sure you read chapters 1 through 5 of Brian Rosner, How to Find Yourself. We have talked about our various travels, New York City, London, and Brussels. We've talked Joe DiMaggio. We've talked about the Resilient Faith at Work podcast. We've talked about waffles.
I do love waffles.
Waffles are amazing. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.